Hi there, my name's Bruce Rain from Brankus Creations, and in this video we'll be reviewing the Creality Ender 5 S1 3D Printer Speed Combo Bundle. There's a mouthful. I'm a relative newcomer to 3D printing. I purchased my first 3D printer, a Creality Ender 3 V2, back in 2021. I'm interested in retro computing, so I use my printer mainly for recreating parts, cases, and brackets for vintage computer equipment. I've always been happy with the results from my Ender 3, but it's an entry-level printer, which means it has some limitations. One of the main limitations is speed. So when I had a chance to test out the Ender 5 S1 Speed Combo Bundle, I jumped at the opportunity. This is the Creality Ender 5 S1 printer. But this isn't just the printer, this is the combo package. So we have all of this as well. So included is this Creality Smart Kit, and this allows you to remotely control and monitor your prints using your smartphone, and it also includes a camera, so you can view what's going on with your prints and also do time-lapse videos. We have a 1 kilogram spool of PLA filament, and we have the Creality Sonic Pad, which is a controller for the printer that utilizes the Klipper firmware. Now, I've never used Klipper before, so that's going to be a fun thing learning about that. And we have this acrylic enclosure, and this encases the printer and allows the temperature inside to remain more consistent and keep out any airflow from outside. And of course, the printer. Quick start guide. Something tells me some assembly required. Little box of knickknacks. Spool of filament. That looks like the print bed. Okay, I think I'm going to need the quick start guide. These are color-coded and number-coded, so I know which one goes where. Install the top component. Hello, top component. Install the Z-axis kit. The printer took me about 40 minutes to assemble, but I was working at a pretty leisurely pace. I think it could be done in 30 minutes easily. The instructions were clear and the assembly was straightforward. Ta-da! Here's the assembled printer in its new home next to my trusty Ender 3 V2. At this stage I haven't set up any of the speed combo additions, so this is just the standard Ender 5 S1. I want to put it through its paces and then compare results and speeds from this setup with the results I get after implementing the upgrades. Now let's take a little tour of the printer. It has a nice solid cube frame with some handles, which is quite convenient. It has a direct drive extruder and an all-metal hot end, which can reach 300 degrees Celsius. It has a filament sensor, a CR touch for automatic bed leveling, and a big, beefy 50 by 15mm parts cooling fan with a two-sided shroud. It's a Cartesian setup with the X-axis motor mounted on the gantry. The bed is cantilevered and can heat to around 100 degrees Celsius. It has a removable, flexible PC-coated plate for strong adhesion. It has an intuitive interface with touchscreen controls. It beeps every time you touch it, which seems to bother some people, but I barely noticed it. It has a full-sized SD card slot and a USB-C connector. There is an 8GB SD card included with a couple of test models, full instructions for the printer, and a copy of the Creality Slicer software, which we'll cover a bit later. The power cable is a little on the short side and hangs out of the left side of the printer. The filament is mounted on the right side of the printer, which means there are things hanging off both sides. It's a small thing, but I think it would have been better to have these both on the same side. Now let's have a look inside. The Ender 5 S1 has a 32-bit controller with an ARM STM32F401 chip. You'll also find this board in the Ender 3 S1 series. It has 4 Trinamic TMC2209 drivers, and from a safety perspective, it's great to see they have put ferrules on the wires. Loading the filament is a breeze. Preheat the printer, remove the tube from the print head, trim the end of the filament, feed it through the filament sensor until it comes out the end of the tube, press the release tab and feed the filament through as far as it can go. Then push the tube back into place. Now we have to level the bed. First we have to do the manual part of the bed leveling, or tramming. Select Leveling Method from the settings page for the manual leveling process. Adjust the Z offset until you find the sweet spot with a piece of paper. Press the numbered buttons in order to set the levels in each corner. Once the manual tramming stage is complete, now it's time for the auto leveling. This will measure the bed distance across a grid and will compensate for any subtle imperfections in the bed or from the tramming. Now it's time for the first print. The supplied SD card came with 2 pre-sliced models, the well-known Benchy boat and a little bunny rabbit. Keep in mind that I have done no further configurations or adjustments other than you have seen. These prints are from the printer straight out of the box. The Benchy took exactly 1 hour to print and the bunny took 30 minutes. The results of both are quite impressive given the speed of the print and the lack of any additional tinkering. Keep in mind that this is still utilising the Marlin firmware. The Klipper upgrade is still to come. I've printed a series of benches from 80mm per second to 240mm per second at 20mm increments and recorded their print times. Prior to printing these, I dialed in the temperature and retraction for this filament, and these were all sliced using Creality Slicer software. The results were very good. Nice clean layers and sharp edges. I'm sure the results could be improved with a bit more tinkering, but I was pretty pleased. At around 140mm per second, we started getting these vibration layers that steadily got worse the faster we printed. This is to be expected, and hopefully the Klipper upgrade will improve this. This is the Creality Sonic Pad, included with the Ender 5 S1 Speed Combo Bundle. This will allow me to upgrade the Ender 5's firmware from Marlin to Klipper. If you're not familiar with Klipper, it adds quite a few benefits over Marlin. The first is that it takes over many of the computational tasks from the printer's controller, so instead of the controller doing all the work, it's shared with the Sonic Pad, which makes printing faster and movement smoother. The other real benefit is easy configuration. If you want to make a change to a printer setting, this can be done simply by editing a text file, without any need to recompile firmware. Another advantage is resonance compensation. By measuring the printer's movement with an accelerometer, any vibrations can be compensated for to give smoother print output at high speeds. One disadvantage of using Klipper is the complexity of setup. For some, it's just too much to bother with, but that's not the case with the Sonic Pad. It comes with all the configurations for most Creality printers preloaded, so the setup process is a breeze. Start by connecting Ethernet and power. If you would rather use Wi-Fi instead of cabled networking, you can skip the Ethernet cable, but be aware that the Sonic Pad can only connect to 2 GHz Wi-Fi networks, not 5 GHz. The first time I powered on the Sonic Pad, it immediately notified me of some updates, so I installed them. The first took ages, the second was quite quick. Select your language, read and agree to the privacy policy, select your location, select your Wi-Fi network, and provide your network password. As I connected via Ethernet, I was able to skip the Wi-Fi step. Name your Sonic Pad. As I only have one, I didn't feel a need to rename it. Next, we select our model of printer. I've selected the 5 series from the menu, and mine is the Ender 5 S1 with no Z switch. This model homes the Z axis with the CR Touch, so there is no need for a Z axis switch. Select USB as the communication method. Then place the supplied SD card into the supplied USB adapter and then into the USB slot indicated on the Sonic Pad screen. Press the flash firmware button and the firmware will be instantly copied to the SD card. Remove the card, make sure the printer is turned off, insert the card into the printer's SD card slot, then press the next button on the Sonic Pad. Switch the printer on, then press the next button. If all has gone well with the firmware flash, the printer's screen will be completely blank, so don't be concerned when you don't see that Creality logo appear. Now we need to connect the Sonic Pad to the printer. The supplied cable is USB-A to micro USB, but there is a micro USB to USB-C adapter included, so we can use it with the Ender 5 S1. Connect the cable to USB 1 of the Sonic Pad. Press the USB schematic link to see which port is USB 1. It won't work if you plug it into any other port. Connect the other end to the Ender 5 S1 and wait. If all goes well, within a few seconds you will see the connected successfully message. Now the Sonic Pad will do a quick self-test to make sure it's communicating correctly with the printer. It will spin up the printer's hot end fan and then ask for confirmation that it's spinning. It will then spin up the part's cooling fan and ask for confirmation. Next, we need to manually level or tram the bed. This is the same as the process we went through during the initial setup, so just follow the on-screen instructions. Now we'll set the Z offset. Move the head to the sweet spot, the same as we did before. Adjust the corners of the bed with the bed screws until it's level, then press Next. Before starting the automatic bed levelling, you can set the temperature of the bed. It's advisable to do the bed levelling while the bed is heated, so I've set the temp to 60 degrees Celsius. Now we wait for the bed to get up to temp and then start the automatic levelling. Once automatic levelling is done, basic setup is complete. At this point, we could begin printing, but there are a couple of other steps I'd like to take first. Firstly, I'm going to add a camera. There is a camera included with the Creality Smart Kit, but unfortunately, this camera won't work with the Sonic Pad. If you want to connect a webcam, you'll need to source your own. There is a list in the description of cameras that are known to work with the Sonic Pad. I'm using a Logitech C922 and it works well. Next, we'll look at the advanced settings. You should perform the hot end and the hot bed PID calibration to ensure temperature stability. If you want to get the most out of your clipper setup, you should also configure the resonance compensation. This might seem a bit daunting, but it's actually quite straightforward. Install the supplied accelerometer sensor to the printer's hot end. Creality provides a number of 3D printable brackets that can be used to mount the sensor. However, I decided to just remove the metal cover from the hot end and use one of the available screw holes. A range of different screws are supplied. Once the accelerometer is tightly mounted, plug it into the back of the Sonic Pad, then press the Next Step button. The Sonic Pad will check the sensor and then proceed with its tests. Using the stepper motors, it will create vibrations and then measure their intensity. The whole process only takes a few minutes. Unplug the sensor cable from the Sonic Pad, remove the sensor from the hot end, then reinstall the metal cover. Or leave it off. I don't think it does much. Now I'm ready to print some more benchies. I've used the exact same G-code files as I used with the Marlin setup and printed them one at a time. Here are the time comparisons. As you can see, we have faster speeds across the board. And now let's look at the results. It's chalk and cheese when comparing the results of the high-speed prints. Those vibration layers are all but gone. Not only are the prints faster, but the quality is better. This should be enough to convince anyone to upgrade to Klipper, but if not, then this might. For those who have set up Octoprint for their 3D printer, I'm sure you love the benefits of the web interface, remote monitoring and time-lapse videos. Well, check this out. Included as part of the Klipper installation on the Sonic Pad, Fluid is installed by default. Fluid is the Klipper web interface which we can access by visiting the IP address of the Sonic Pad. Just find out the IP address from the network settings, either Wi-Fi or wired. Here you can do pretty much everything you can with Octoprint, plus a few extras, such as editing your printer's config text file. Time-lapse functionality is built in too, you just need a camera connected and to switch time-lapse on. I had never used Fluid before and found the interface very intuitive. And if you're still not convinced, the Sonic Pad can control up to 4 printers simultaneously. As soon as I realised this, I immediately made the upgrade to my Ender 3 V2 as well. At this time, the Sonic Pad only supports one camera, so you can only do time-lapse and video monitoring of one printer. One other thing I would recommend is to install the Moonraker plugin to your slicing software. This allows you to slice, then immediately upload the G-code to the Sonic Pad with one action, along with a preview of the model. If you would like to find out more about setting up and configuring a Sonic Pad, I highly recommend Ricky Impey's video series on the Sonic Pad basics, as well as his Sonic Pad intermediate video series. There are links to both in the description. I printed out a few challenging STLs. I first ran a bridging test to challenge the part's cooling fan. We started getting some stringing from about 50mm onwards, but it did manage to get all the way to 150mm without a catastrophic failure. All of the following tests are print-in-place models and were printed at 250mm a second. First, this fidget spinner. Followed by this clamp thingy. I then did this rotating iris orb box. And this slider puzzle. I also did this pin toy, a recreation of the old metal pin toys. Each of the pins is unsupported while printing, so you are reliant on the adhesion to the bed. There are about 650 pins, and of those I had 2 or 3 that came loose near the end of printing and ended up rather deformed. However, the result is still pretty impressive. There are links to all of these STLs in the description. I mentioned earlier that the benches I printed were sliced with the Creality Slicer software. When you load Creality Slicer, you can be forgiven for thinking it looks very much like the Creality Slicer software. That's because Creality Slicer is open source, and the Creality Slicer is a fork of that source code. The great thing about the Creality Slicer is that it includes printer profiles for all Creality printers. At the time of making this video, there is no Ender 5 S1 profile included with Creality Slicer. On the flip side, the Creality Slicer is a bit buggy. I use a Mac and maybe the Windows version is better, but I encountered a range of bugs, such as not being able to select models after loading them, not being able to switch between prepare and preview views, and not being able to see the sliced preview. The slicing results are good, but those bugs are a deal breaker and are preventing me from using it as my main slicer. Hopefully this will be resolved in a future version. Next, I decided I wanted to try some other filament types, and materials like ABS work much better with stable temperatures, so I figured it was a good time to test out the included acrylic enclosure. Installation wasn't difficult, but it was very fiddly. Allow yourself a good 45 minutes. The front door was particularly difficult. It felt like the hinge side of the door piece was about 0.5 mm too tall. It's very snug, but I got it in there. There is no top piece, which isn't surprising given that the gantry hangs over the edge. I've no doubt the sides will greatly improve temperature stability, but we'll certainly be losing a lot of heat out the top. I decided to try an ABS print to see how it responded in the enclosure, and here are the results. The advertised 250mm a second speed of this printer is recommended for PLA only, so I printed this at 120mm a second. The hot end was 260 degrees C and the bed was 100 degrees C. The results look really good. No warping or delamination of the layers. I also tried some PETG at 245 degrees C hot end and 80 degrees C bed. Once again, a very good result. This is the last item included in the speed combo and is the Creality Smart Kit 2. It's basically a little box that you can connect to your network and to your printer and use for remote control of your 3D printer using an app on your phone. This kit includes a camera, which when plugged into the box also gives you remote video monitoring. This is not designed for use in conjunction with the Sonic Pad. It's an alternative. If you don't want to go down the path of using Klipper firmware and the Sonic Pad, this will give you remote control of your printer while staying with the Marlin firmware. It also ties in with the Creality Cloud, which allows you to upload and slice models in the cloud and then send them to your printer. This is really designed as a simple alternative to running Octoprint on a Raspberry Pi. I'll review and cover the full details of the Creality Smart Kit in a future video. The Ender 5 S1 is a great printer. The frame is solid and its print speed is fast. I printed virtually everything at 250mm a second for my PLA tests, and I never had any extrusion issues, so the 300°C print head and dual gear extruder is definitely up to the task. I felt like I had to tram the bed more often than I do on my Ender 3, and I think this is because of the cantilevered bed, so this is probably the printer's biggest weak point. Also, I wasn't a huge fan of the PC-coated print bed and has since replaced it with PEI. Another pleasant surprise was how quiet the printer was. I have the printer behind me and sometimes I was turning around to check that it was actually printing because I couldn't hear it. Even at high speed, the printer is pretty quiet compared to some other models. There are some good quality printers in this price bracket, and on its own the Ender 5 S1 is solid but doesn't really stand out that much. But when paired with the Sonic Pad and acrylic enclosure in this speed combo bundle, it's taken to a whole new level. The Sonic Pad provides a massive improvement to the speed and print quality, and I consider it an absolute must. It's looking like Klipper is becoming the next big thing in 3D printing with a large and helpful community behind it. While there may be some that say Klipper is free, so why pay extra for it, keep in mind that you still need some hardware to run it. So if you factor in the cost of a Raspberry Pi and a touch screen, the Sonic Pad is pretty good value by comparison, and the ease of installation makes it worth every cent. The Ender 5 S1 can be used straight out of the box with minimal assembly and configuration, so it will suit people new to the hobby. But it also allows for plenty of modification and tinkering, so should suit more seasoned users as well. The lack of a lid for the acrylic enclosure does defeat the purpose somewhat, but it did work well for the ABS print tests I did. I would really like the ability to set a static IP address for the Sonic Pad, as well as add a second camera. I do hope these are things that will be added in future revisions. If you like the look of the Ender 5 S1, there are links in the description for buying the Speed Combo Bundle. Please consider liking and subscribing, and please feel free to share your opinions on the Ender 5 S1 and the Sonic Pad in the comments. A big thank you to Creality for sending me this printer for testing. I have lots more 3D print content coming soon, and thanks for watching.